I would have been introduced to Minecraft in 2011. My friend was inviting me over to check out a new game I had never heard of. It was a sandbox with survival elements. It would generate a world made of blocks, and you could break them and place them wherever you wanted. It also had animals, food, and monsters that appeared in the night. You would need light and shelter to protect yourself with. He showed me his home, which was a 2x3 block wide room carved into the side of a hill. A wooden door connected it to the outside, and a staircase descended down below in order to try and find rare diamonds to make tools with. Maybe he had just started this world, but I had the feeling as though he was pulling the mobile game ad trick on me. The one where the player miserably screws up some trivial challenge just to make you mad, like, "You've got to be kidding me, pass it over." His initial pitch was not selling it as well as my imagination was. If you can break and replace any part of this land, then why is this all you have done with it? As soon as I got my own copy, it was over. Minecraft took control and would not let go. In 2022, the last thing I had ever built filled an area of 101 by 101 blocks. Doing the math, the difference between the first build and the last build is 11 years! It would become a huge part of my life, and was even responsible for this YouTube channel. Where are all the Minecraft videos then? They were old, and for an audience that grew up, among other reasons. I suppose I should get one Minecraft video on the channel, so this is that. Cards on the table, this video is 100% just an excuse to show off my Minecraft creations and trail off about art or something. It's my house. I get to choose the movie. A quick tangent I'll be indulging myself with is on the subject of motion sickness. Some people say they can't watch Minecraft because it makes them feel sick or dizzy, and it probably has to do with how the game stretches along the corners of the screen it is playing on. I bring this up for any of the people I force to watch my video who do not play Minecraft, but also because I thought it would be fun to create a video demonstration. The game is played from a first-person perspective. The camera is looking through the eyes of the character we control. On a computer with a keyboard and mouse, we use the mouse to rotate the character and look around. Now, in real life, we have peripheral vision. If you raise your arms up and stand in a T-pose and look forward, you might just see a little bit of your hands even without looking at them. We can't take advantage of our peripheral vision in video games because video games only exist on a little rectangle in front of us. But this doesn't mean we are stuck with a tiny window into the game world. We can instead just crush a wider angle of vision into that rectangle. It does create a distorted picture, but if you play video games too much, like me, you adapt to it. The distortion really only happens near the edges of the screen. And when we want to look at something on the edge, we use our in-game eyes rather than our real ones to look at it, which we do by rotating the camera to move it closer to the middle. Of course, as a spectator and not the one playing, what the player focuses on and what you want to look at may be different things. Say this carved pumpkin on the tree really has your attention, but the player is looking around at other things. As the camera rotates and the perspective changes, that pumpkin face is going to start looking a little weird. It's easier to see how dramatic this effect is if I stabilize the part of the frame that has the pumpkin in it. The field of vision that I use in the game is larger than the default value, so this distortion effect will be stronger than normal in most of the footage used in this video. All I can recommend is to keep your eyes near the middle of the frame, and hopefully nothing super interesting is happening in the corners. I didn't know that creative mode even existed when I started. In creative mode, the survival elements are disabled and your character is granted flight and infinite resources from an instantly accessible library of everything that exists in the game. Survival mode, the mode that I thought was the whole game, requires you to eat and fend off monsters. If you wanted to build things, you would have to extract materials that already existed in the world. This meant that if you wanted to build a house, you were probably going to build it out of wood or stone, and not out of diamonds. This was fine. I didn't need to build a house out of diamonds. I just wanted to play in the sandbox where you could walk around something you built. I built a castle. I built a fort on the coast. I dug a hole and called it a crater. I built a town. I built another castle, which was way bigger. And I dug a staircase all the way to the bottom of the world. Some buildings were inside this mountain, some were underwater, and I had considered making some in the sky. This world is pretty humble. Even if the castles are made of nice bricks and iron, they are simple and not really that big. These underwater houses are just vacant cubes of dirt to play with the mechanics of removing water blocks. The layout of the town is disorderly and sometimes claustrophobic. The placement of most structures just following along with the most immediate and intuitive ideas that the randomly generated landscape inspires. We don't need to be so critical of something I made as a little kid. My drawings from that time were not that impressive either, although I have no doubt that I spent a lot more time playing with blocks than with pencils. But, while Minecraft is much more easily a game than pencil and paper are, it is still an art form. The boy can't build a real castle in real life, but he could draw one. He could paint one, write a story about one, maybe write a song about one. But Minecraft is the game. And not only is it the game, Minecraft is good at reaching scale fast. If I give you a canvas divided into a grid, where each unit or square can only be filled with one color, and I tell you to make a tree, you'll have a tree pretty quick. It's probably going to be pretty abstract and featureless, but you'll have it. If I expand this canvas, keeping the tree there, and ask you to fill in the rest, you could break the rules and disobey the scale that the first tree implies, but if you obey, maybe you'll have a forest, and you'll have it done in no time, a whole forest. Even if that forest doesn't end up very interesting, I'm sure most people could observe the labor of the result. In most mediums, the brushstrokes of a work may be invisible to the inexperienced, fading into the bigger picture. But I don't think these squares can hide from anyone, certainly not from me. Not only could you easily see these blocks, there is an extra metric of labor to observe when they are from a survival mode world. You can't place more than one block at a time, and you can only place blocks at a limited distance away from yourself. There is a digital version of physicality to the process of constructing things in this game, even more so in survival mode where you have to obtain blocks from the world by locating them and mining them with the proper tools, or crafting them from other materials. Game activities. With these metrics, it was immediately rewarding to do anything. It's no wonder I chose Minecraft. Building a city sounds hard, but if all you needed to make a big city was to play a game for a bit, how could that not be great? When I first dove into multiplayer, placing the squares of color for my unique character appearance and finding some random server to hop into, I don't remember anything in particular that I wanted to do. Perhaps it was to just build another city but have other kids walk around it instead of just myself. This was a survival server and there were no rules for player conduct, so that meant building a house close to the world entrance was a very bad idea. I woke up one morning, and to my innocent shock, my house was stripped apart. I had no real valuables. The culprits did this for fun. I walked around to see that most of the structures were in similar condition, and decided I had to start some kind of revolt. I built a shack and filled it with stone swords and a message calling victims to arms, to join me in some kind of anti-griefer movement, I guess. Then the first player I had ever seen since joining walked up to me. They entered a text message into the game chat asking me what I was doing. I said I was starting a movement, and they said, "Cool. Want to go mining?" I said sure. We went deep underground and spent an hour or two digging a 6-block wide, 4 blocks tall tunnel. Eventually they had to log off, and I never saw them again, but I kept digging the tunnel for several hours. I would move all the stone and dirt I collected into chests, but after a while I would start leaving ores where I found them. I liked to turn around and look at the tunnel stretch into the distant fog, to see what all I had moved. I never did anything with the blocks I collected. I just assumed my new friend would show up and take them. There were cities waiting to be built, waiting inside of these chests in this tunnel to be given form. All I had to do was click on some squares, and the theoretical castle would get bigger and bigger. Actually, I don't know if I was thinking like that. I could be making this up. I do know I liked moving blocks, and if digging this tunnel results in more than a tunnel, then all the more reason I have to do what is fun. Was I really interested in castles, though? I know I wasn't drawing them with pencils. There was something different I built in my original survival world, something more deliberate. It was something of a temple meant to be explored. In watching YouTubers play the game, I saw more than just survival worlds, but user-made adventure worlds and puzzle worlds, as well as multiplayer minigames. Fast scale and brushstroke visibility were far from the last things Minecraft had to offer. My castles were built to be looked at, and not much else. There was no way to play them in the way that these other user-made worlds could be. Without creative mode, it would not be as easy to make these playable builds, but it would not stop me from trying. I dug some tunnels meant to take the form of some kind of gauntlet of puzzles and challenges, using whatever blocks were easy to find, the walls left as whatever material the earth had put there. This was the most efficient way to construct a challenge. I didn't need things to look fancy. I was more interested in a sense of mystery, a unique feeling to the atmosphere of early Minecraft I can remember being captured by. Often I would look at the shape of things, natural or not, and wonder about them in the way you would if you believed they were real. Or at least that is the best way I can describe it. Even in the tunnels I dug myself, I would look at the patterns of dirt and gravel in the stone walls and the corners where the tunnel turns out of sight, and wonder if it was all as I had planned, or if there was something else. All my valuables I collected in this world were hidden in secret stashes, just in case it were that I didn't know the game as I had thought. I might be making stuff up again. Before Minecraft, I like to orchestrate imagination games for myself or my friends. That might mean Zelda on a Magnet-Doodle board, my fingers walking on its surface as the characters, or an entire Pokemon game with a custom-drawn region on my bedroom walls that was to scale with Pokemon cards. Soon, my friends would be forced to truly walk inside of a dungeon of my own machinations. This temple had like 4 or 5 challenges, mostly trivial, 2 of which were just pick a path and hope you don't die, the last room asking you to find a hidden passage as though there was a story, and then a ladder takes you to the surface with the most modest monument I've ever seen, or maybe it's a pedestal? This couldn't have been a race. I give this thing a spotlight because it's different. Where most builds in this world were the equivalent of coloring in the lines of predetermined shapes, extending a pre-existing pattern into the blank areas of an extended canvas, this was a new shape altogether, and perhaps the beginning of a deeper relationship with the game. Obviously, I eventually figured out that my single-player worlds were not actually secretly multiplayer or haunted, and that if I wanted my friends to walk around my creations, we would need to set up a server to host them. Eventually, too, I would finally learn about creative mode, where survival elements are disabled and resources don't have to be manually acquired. Of course I thought it was cheating, how could it not be? But I got over it fast. Because it meant that things like this temple would not be stuck with such a small color palette, and could be constructed much faster, which meant it was time for the next thing I wanted to build, an imagination game far greater in scope. I really don't remember anything about Shadow of Israfel, but I know I was into it and wanted to do it myself, whatever that would mean. Anything I say about it is strictly based on memory and a surface-level look back. Anything more would just be me reading a wiki. Shadow of Israfel was a Minecraft survival Let's Play video series, a type of YouTube show where someone records themselves playing through a game that eventually transformed into a scripted roleplay with a narrative and custom-built adventure for the YouTubers to go on, their characters themselves. I think it was framed as being real, with the in-game actors passed off as naturally occurring, intelligent computer characters, and the adventure being suddenly sprung on them, Israfel being an invader that threatened their survival world. The show also featured modifications to the game itself, so for a kid watching it, it was very mysterious and exciting. What do I have to do to get invaded by Israfel? I want to go on this adventure! The boy couldn't replicate a production like that. But we weren't going to make videos, we were just going to play imagination games and roleplay it for ourselves. This was really just me and one other friend. He would be the player, and I would create the entire world and the story, and play every NPC, leaving the game, logging into the Minecraft website to change my appearance, and opening the game again whenever I needed to switch who I was playing as. It was mostly a one-to-one ripoff of the Shadow of Israfel, but smaller in scale since I was doing it all myself. I'm sure I was pretty happy with it, recreating all the story beats and unique challenges of the narrative. There was one part of the story where the heroes had to find a wizard in some floating tower. I recall the journey as needing to navigate some labyrinth of floating buildings and climbing up to it in whatever way they could, but looking at that part again now, it was pretty much just walking up a staircase and building a bridge, which is pretty much what I did, only the staircase was more of a natural ascent over rooftops, and instead of a bridge, there were some big jumps to make, more aligned with how the adventure felt to me. One of the first areas of the world was a village I was going to build along a river until a friend of mine detonated a couple dozen blocks of TNT in the nearby forest, turning one side of the river into a crater, to which I apparently said, "You're a genius!" and used that crater for the village. With creative mode, I would construct a carnival location with a floor built out of gold and diamonds, rare and valuable blocks. Can I dig up the floor? No, I'll give you cool stuff for playing the minigames I built. I think I had to have taken a lot of creative liberties. I don't remember there being a training arc with Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. Like my survival world, most constructions were again just informed by the landscape and my immediate intuitions, although now guided with the intent to follow along with the Shadow of Israfel story, and now possessing the powers of creative mode. While now I was cheating by making things out of expensive blocks, they weren't just to be admired for their labor, the builds had practical functions. I was making a game in a game. There weren't any real plans, we just played every day and wanted to do more, so I would often be rushing builds together as we went, so that we didn't have to wait long to continue with the story. Of course, it wasn't totally our own story, I was copying Shadow of Israfel, which meant there was a beginning and supposedly an end to conform to. In trying to manage each part of that story, a loose constraint found its way into this world through the in-game map. Now, because of gameplay changes to the way maps work in Minecraft, and my old worlds having no old version backups, I can't really show you what the main map for this world looked like, but I'll make something close. New maps start with a 1-to-1 scale such that blocks can be read individually. The map can be expanded at the cost of that precise detail. The old maps would cover a pretty large area, at least for the sense of scale we had back then, what with the much more limited visibility. In modern Minecraft, at the highest vision range settings, I can nearly see the entire border of the space this map would have taken up. Anyway, the appearance of this bigger map would be a low-resolution approximation of what the land looked like. If there were some unnatural colors and disordered pixels, then you could be sure you built something big enough for the map to notice it, and that would be sort of a goal. I wasn't going to make the whole thing a mess of unreadable pixels, but perhaps like a real map, I would draw a web of different locations together, and they, with the land they occupied, would imply a huge interconnected world, one that was reasonable to manage. The map made these builds feel bigger than they actually were, blurring my perception of what was really constructed and what it felt like. I was proud, felt responsible for a whole world. Obviously, I wasn't responsible for the whole world. The landscape generates forever. This map space of mine is technically infinitely small. This map border would keep the infinity hidden, but it would not hold for long. Shadow of Israfel was never finished, but I think it was assumed that the finale would see something grander than could be achieved in unmodified gameplay. With my limited capability, I decided that Israfel simply became the Ender Dragon, Minecraft's hidden boss fight. Finding it would require me to step outside of the map boundaries. The dungeon that takes you to the Ender Dragon has no visible entrance. You have to make your own. So I made a very generic tunnel to it out of expensive blocks. Reaching it, you would walk over a long 1-block path with redstone dust on it to mimic blood. It's not spectacular, but it's pretty far out from the map border, so I figured that alone made it special. In making this video, I got a third-party map viewer called Unmind to get a look at all the generated terrain, and was surprised to see that I had traveled out of bounds a lot more than I remembered. Beyond the dungeon is some kind of funny set of statues of some of the characters. Over to the east seems to be nothing. Probably flew out there one time, realized the world does in fact go on forever, and returned to comfort. This string at the southeast is a portal to the nether dimension. I have no idea what's in there. The nether has its own world file, which may have been overridden, but this was definitely a portal created inside the nether, with the outside portal generating in the middle of nowhere, and needing a path to follow back home. Then there is the north, which goes on and on and on and on, probably over 10 times the distance of the original map by now. What could be so special as to need to take place 10,000 blocks away from everything else? It's the North Pole, where Santa lives, of course. I should have known he had to live somewhere in this world. He left gifts at everyone's homes. It was only me and one guy doing the roleplay adventure, but in total there were around 6 or less than 8 people who logged on just to do survival stuff or play around with redstone devices in creative mode, or play with hacks. One guy was getting coal that year. Many of them wouldn't stick around. There were plenty of other Minecraft things to do and check out, but a few of us basically lived on this server. The contents of the game have pretty much quadrupled since that time, but even with what little there was, without mods and minigames, all the limitations of the blocks, innate and imposed, it seemed like we were never going to get enough of it. Once the story had concluded and we finally started to get exhausted with this map, I had planned to try and rope one of my other friends into another Shadow of Israfel type world, only this time with an original story, and we would make a YouTube series out of it. The show would have been terrible because we were little baby people, but also because I was still improvising like before. We didn't have the same structure or constraints to keep things under control. It was a lot more fun to just put blocks into the world and explain them later rather than organize something in advance. Only a few builds got finished. Without a clear story to guide us, and without a map to confine us, there was no way to avoid getting lost in the infinity. Not just of this world specifically, but of all worlds that could be. Like the players who didn't stick around, we just wanted more ways to play with the blocks, and there were endless excuses to jump around. By 2012, Minecraft had definitely exploded. There was now a massive online community and an endless amount of user creations to see and to play, and I wanted to put my own stuff out there. Up to 2015 or so, I would have shared a lot of stuff. On Planet Minecraft, I would upload custom worlds and skins of some variety, and by April 2013, on YouTube, I would start sharing Minecraft animations. In both categories would be a similar story, throwing together lots of small things and not managing to finish bigger things for failing to match the reward of the endless conveyor belt of novelty and easier validations. I was still just experimenting and improvising, wanting to exercise what all Minecraft was capable of, but also gradually seeking to please the internet. YouTubers would play mini-games and adventure maps built by the community, and by the community meant it could be my worlds. One type of world that seemed simple enough were parkour maps, jumping obstacle courses that were usually linear and featured occasional puzzles. These were short and could be built very quickly. All you had to do was string along a trail of blocks with gaps between them, and that's a parkour challenge. It could be terrible and not fun, and you could just say it was a rage map, which is often what I did. The funniest part of the YouTuber video is when they fall down and scream into the microphone, of course. So, the worse the map, the funnier the video. Well, I may have figured that so long as YouTubers intended to play every map ever posted, that they would eventually play ours. We weren't totally without standards. As bare bones as much of these maps are, there were a few principles to their making. Early jumps would of course be easier than later ones, reflected by the material of the blocks increasing in rarity as the map went on. We understood that a steady progression was more engaging than a chaotic one. Most of the time. In improvising the maps, a harder jump sometimes just comes out of nowhere, and rather than fix it, we would place a sign down saying, "It's possible," or cry about it. Probably part of our intent to disrespect the player, which is apparent more clearly in later builds. We definitely only tested jumps individually, rather than with how they worked with the rest of the map surrounding it. There are several instances where the design of the path makes progress literally impossible. This minecart rail and this waterfall checkpoint platform literally blocked the jumps directly beneath it, one of a handful of bad oversights. I never play-tested the maps without flight, so we never experienced the awful punishment of falling down, a punishment that was inconsistent. Sometimes the jumps would be so high off the ground you'd fall far enough that you wouldn't even be alive to climb the waterfall you placed down, which was really better anyway since most checkpoints had beds to respawn at, so long as it was nighttime and you could use them. If there were any actual principles I cared for, it was just in letting the blocks flow. There were endless ideas to realize, endless iterations of block arrangements. This meant that regardless of any theme, there would also be a strange mix-up of purely abstract and practical blocks alongside constructions that actually represented things that were only disguised as parkour. Almost nothing was recycled, every step and map with new concepts. Some had different approaches to checkpoints, some had optional collectibles, some had something of a story, and one had branching pathways to do in any order of your choice. One map insisted it contained one of every block and every jump in the whole game, and another map insisted it was particularly long. When the maps ended, they either congratulated you, gifted you rare items you didn't have a use for, or gave you explosives to destroy the map. One map has a fake out that teleports you to the beginning, one map just kills you for fun, and another has a book that acts like winning was some kind of major achievement you should really be proud of. Like, yay! I conquered this thing. I have no clue as to the sincerity of these words. Did I think these maps to have some sort of prestige? No, I knew what prestige looked like. These maps were small enough that I could just decide to start one on a whim and have it done in a few hours at most. Nothing requiring any type of planning or serious thought. It was just the same simple fun of the game. Of course, I wasn't without a desire for something bigger. I knew these were small things, and again, Minecraft finds scale quickly. How hard could it be to make something truly massive? To make a game in this game that really felt like a game of its own. I'd played maps with such ambitions, I wanted that for myself. I would take more than a few shots at going big, but none of them would get close to completion. They were no match for what was easy and new. Me and a friend tried to make a capture the flag map that I don't have the files for, and it was mostly a few small structures surrounded by temporary or unrelated micro builds that showed up at random. What if we did this? What if we did that? Hey, look at this, check this out, if only we could get this idea to work. I'm not sure how interested we really were in capture the flag. We probably just had an idea or two about how a part of it could be done, and wanted to see another side of the sandbox. Another time, we tried to see if we could do a Zelda map. And this would be bigger than anything before following our discovery of certain game modifications that we could use to change the way we placed blocks. You could set regions with a custom tool and define them with a typed command, filling huge spaces instantly with blocks. This is a built-in feature today. Another tool allowed you to place predefined shapes of any size at any distance, sort of like a 3D paintbrush, alongside a smoothing tool which you could use to hammer down regions into a more natural shape. We could sculpt entire custom landscapes faster than ever before. The problem with this project, aside from still just goofing around with toys on the sidelines and integrating random ideas into the world spontaneously with little consideration for the whole, the map itself appeared to start making demands. Zelda games have a specific kind of structure to them, one that both of us understood as Zelda players, but not deeply enough to have what it would take to make one ourselves at a similar scale. You can imagine the cycle of Zelda being that you start by walking around a mostly safe area, a village probably, trying to solve a broader puzzle involving talking to NPCs and acquiring a new tool or ability to unlock access to a more dangerous area, a dungeon. The dungeon would contain micro-puzzles and other challenges that fit together as one bigger challenge that introduces another new tool or ability, which is all then tested together against one high-stakes challenge, a boss fight, after which you repeat repeat this cycle, each iteration multiplying in difficulty as your tool set increases in size. Before you get into that cycle, you have to start the story, which usually requires traveling from a starting location to a hub area, often a castle town, that connects all the areas of the game world. We made it up to the castle town, which of course needed to feel huge and important, so I shaped a huge bowl of land to prepare and outline the space the town would take up. We would go no further than this. I don't think it was necessarily that it was too large of a space. We had the tools to fill it. Only, what do you fill it with? How do you do this? Or, the tougher question, and the greatest obstacle of all which had finally presented itself, how do you do this good? You never usually engage with an entire city in a game. There are only specific buildings you can enter which serve a specific purpose in gameplay. And even then, you probably won't run through all of them at once. Some locations may be reserved for later in the story, or have subplots that require you to travel around. Either way, there is a specific nature to the way a city gets constructed here. What abilities will you have in our Minecraft map? How do the interactable buildings in this place interconnect with the rest of the world? Aside from function, there is also the visual design and aesthetic, its style and composition. It would be easy to just make a grid of roads and fill in the non-road space with prisms, but maybe, for the first time, I'm wondering if that's the right call. If doing what is easy is how I want to fill this space. For some reason now, it would not be easy to keep this project going. This section before the castle town was a relatively small valley where you were confined to a strict path, dense with purpose, constructions with unique function and interactivity, emphasized by the consistent and simple detail in the surrounding non-playable hills. This pattern of playable versus non-playable, one I probably created by accident, informs the relationship the player will have with the rest of the world, which means the castle town is going to need to follow along. But the castle town is a more complicated and more important location in both design and the fiction. It needs to be a big deal and look like a big deal. And looking like a big deal is going to require that what is playable doesn't get lost in what isn't, and I didn't know what was going to be playable, or how to prevent what wasn't playable from being so uninteresting that you don't even notice it. This part of our map had suddenly found some tough criteria to meet. The magnitude I ordered, the size of the canvas I drew, big for the sake of big, was too much to bear. I couldn't just fill it with a metaphorical forest, otherwise it would be overshadowed by the smaller and more focused canvas prior. The way to handle this would be to do the castle town last, do everything else, and be prepared to leave it in an empty and intimidating state until the end, and/or stop treating the first draft like it's too sacred to tear down. I thought that because I had the tools that would make it easier to fill a larger canvas, that a larger canvas was a no-brainer. But more blocks means more detail, more to pay attention to. I couldn't just gesture to it and expect it to be more interesting on scale alone. I had to become more intentional, especially with how well the first part of it happened to be. Spontaneity was my driving force, stacking up towers of whatever was immediately interesting in the moment. A great method for results, but the castle town needed better results. So, we'd soon be off to whatever was more fresh, had less resistance. Getting lost and exploring heavily modified gameplay, our group would mess around in survival worlds packed with an overabundance of custom blocks and mechanics, some of which got pulled directly from other video games. I was happy to see the portal gun from the Portal series, along with other copied mechanics from that game. Of course, with access to these tools, I had to make Portal myself. Portal is a game where you can make portals to traverse a space in a not-so-typical way, with the purpose of solving puzzles based around physics and spatial intuition. It would mostly be a simple game if it weren't for the complexity of navigating a space built around using portals. It also has a mysterious plot and a funny antagonist. Hall of Fame title. If people who don't play games had better game sense, it would easily be one of the first games I recommend to them. My map I built would end up being not much more than an abridged knockoff of Portal. It's not one-to-one, but there isn't much to it other than, look, I made Portal! The polish of the features and map design do not compare. The puzzles couldn't help but be cramped and require too much precision to not break or get you killed. The mechanics do follow a careful pattern of introduction to the player before getting more complicated, but likely only out of faithfulness to the source material and convenience of interest in the features rather than real planning. There is a little bit of personality in here, but nothing like in the roleplay world. The nature of Minecraft is rejected anywhere it can be in favor of the nature of Portal. While respawning in a game with a level system usually automates resetting things when you fail or die, that is one of the things I didn't manage for some reason. I suspect that in trying to use command blocks to automate moving your respawn position, the text instruction that would do that wasn't working properly, and rather than find a fix, I chose the fast solution of giving you beds to set your spawn point at manually. I wasn't interested in spending time to work out anything technical. I just wanted to make Portal stuff happen, and everything else worked out fast. The Planet Minecraft page for the map has a teaser line claiming there would be 100 test chambers, the puzzles. That would make my map 5 times bigger than the original game. That would have been terrible. The original game may be kind of small, but it is very effective with all of its pieces. I wasn't working with much more, and would have exhausted all the features long before reaching that goal. The blocks had me convinced that because it was easy to build something big, making the big things I liked and wanted to copy would only be a matter of time. The truth is that these big things were more than big. It was never their size. This sense of big is a feeling, one I had yet to understand. In digging through my ancient projects, specifically this Portal map, I didn't think I was going to manage locating the right mods and versions necessary to actually play it, and tried to see about converting the world into a 3D model that I could look at in Blender, which, with specific software, JMC2OBJ, is pretty easy. Although most of the modded blocks either don't appear right or don't appear at all. It would have been a pretty crude way to look at that world, but it took no time to set up. As intimidating as something like 3D animation software might be, it turns out that making a Minecraft animation wouldn't be as challenging as I had thought. I told you I did Minecraft animations, and the timeline is lining up with when we got started, so here we go. My more technically inclined friend had introduced me to Blender as the next step in our video making potential. We already made videos at home for ourselves, predating my YouTube activity by a long time, and this was the key to CGI for him. But for me, I just wanted to copy things, of course, and he told me we could do Captain Sparkles stuff. Captain Sparkles referring to the creator of the oldest animated Minecraft parody music videos, and probably the oldest Minecraft animations in general. I wasn't confident or interested at first. I wanted to want, as my friend told me I put it, but I didn't realize how easy it could be, at least for me. Adapting to the specific way you navigate the 3D space couldn't be so hard. I already had good intuition for 3D through video games. Worlds I did not need to model myself, I could build them in Minecraft and port them over with a few clicks in a software made to do specifically that. The characters? My friend would take care of that. The lights. Blender has its own inventory to pull from, and a settings menu for the specifics of those lights and the world in general. Things I could analogize through a gaming perspective. The rendering and exporting, a few clicks and some waiting. The movements, the animation itself, didn't have to be a huge leap from the territory of pivot stick figure animator. Among the old and installed on the school computer softwares was the very simple animation software Pivot Stick Figure Animator. A stick figure sits on a blank canvas, waiting to be repositioned and its joints rotated. You take a picture of it, then you move it around and take another picture, repeating over and over, then you can play back your pictures like a flip book. I made so many Sonic animations with this. I don't have them. And of course they would have been made out of primitive shapes, but they didn't need to look good. In fact, the lack of all detail is the strength of the program. Like Minecraft, precision is traded for speed. If in Minecraft I could count up the blocks, here I could count up the frames. You didn't need to be concerned about anything but the raw power of motion. I doubt I'd ever have animated anything so soon if it weren't so accessible. How do I get from here to Blender? 3D animation uses the same system of moving a figure around and rotating joints, only rather than controlling primitive shapes, the shapes could be anything. And I didn't need to animate in a straight line from start to finish. I could save poses to specific points in time, and the computer would interpolate the positions and rotations in between. In that sense, it was almost easier. Professionals fine-tune this interpolation. The automatic mathematical curves that determine the in-between position values are usually not good. But I was making 3D stuff move, and that was spectacular enough. It felt big. To grant it my own fiction, or I suppose to just copy stuff I liked, could not be more exciting. My first animation was an AMV that was derivative of Captain Sparkle's Fallen Kingdom video, with a runtime about 1 minute long. It featured multiple characters, a lot of camera cuts, and some custom props as I began to dip my toes into the basics of modeling. One character would sing the song in a void, while Steve, in his villager kingdom, gets tossed off his throne by the evil urban legend Herobrine and his army of monsters. It was the coolest thing I had ever made, and it's lost media. Because after getting a Content ID notification for using copyrighted music, I panicked, not understanding what that meant or what the consequences were, and deleted the video from YouTube, the only place it would exist after I finished projects, since I would delete them off my machine to save space. I was so proud. I showed it to everyone I knew. Going from stick figures to what seemed so alive as this fully realized world, I had to have been a god. I must be more upset about it today, because I still like to hope that somebody out there saved it. But back then, I wasted no time getting to episode 2. It wasn't enough to just have one home run. The first animation was good in isolation, but I never intended for it to be the end. Far from it. Episode 2 is not an AMV, and features a follow-up story beat where Steve wonders where his queen is. It's not Alex, because Alex doesn't exist yet. A villager mimes that Herobrine captured her, so Steve decides he has to make the most scuffed sword of all time before setting off to save her. Not before I show up to basically say he's the chosen one, which is so boring that even he knows it. I packed this episode with as many villagers as I could. Look at me! I am creating life! How could you not be convinced you are peering into an alternate world with all this motion? Episode 3. We return to the castle town, literally and metaphorically. I had no plan. Steve was gonna sneak into the castle, now controlled by Herobrine, and I have no idea how he was gonna do it. The set was built for episode 1, which kind of did have a plan, but only because I had thought of the whole thing all at once so thoroughly that nothing really actually had to be thought about. This meant confronting the fact that this story was not really all that interesting to begin with. It may have gone hard in Pivot Stick Figure Animator, where the world and the fiction disappear behind the spectacle of motion, but not here. I was seeing the world now, and it asked for attention and care. Luckily, this wasn't a real hit on YouTube, so I could pivot to other ideas. And of course, there were lots. Minecraft had no shortage of toys for me. However, it wouldn't be long before most of my animation efforts would be spent on extremely short-form projects, fan animations for YouTubers I liked, a thing that would be heavily incentivized after my channel started getting a lot of traffic because of them. I know that these old videos are tainted in a way that I can't ignore, but to omit them would be to leave a significant gap in the timeline I've been drawing with this video. There are good reasons not to share them anymore, regardless of the material itself being inoffensive, but they show my progress in the craft of animation, which is relevant here. When I started putting things on YouTube, it was originally to share things I wanted to make, but eventually, after seeing the numbers, I started making things just to share. They would all be shorts, never longer than 15 seconds, the fan animations often taking sound clips from existing videos and recontextualizing them, or simply remaking their original context in animated form. If I couldn't download the map from the source, I would gladly remake it myself. Aside from animation on YouTube, I also tried to see if I could do my own Minecraft Let's Plays, an activity that was not very creative in the moment, but after nearly 100 videos would result in some refinement of editing quality. I would do these things for around 2 years, slowing down by late 2015. There was a strange progression in both realms where, as my practice with the craft and quality of results improved, my creativity went down. I was figuring out what looked good at the same time I was getting bored with what I was making, but I liked the views and ad revenue, so things started following a formula. Polished, but not so interesting. I did manage some animations that weren't just shorts, although the longer things were more like skits that still barely touched a minute. When I could get some real length on a project, I cancelled it, just like the OG series, for not having a plan and thinking it was kind of lame way too late. There's also a serious possibility that sometimes I would set up a scene, and the render would either never look good, or take so long to render a single frame that it would have taken several days or more of my computer doing nothing but rendering, which was always discouraging. What was I supposed to do? Go outside? This video isn't even good enough to need all this render time. Any other schemes for longer projects mostly ended up as folders with a first draft document and little else. Not far from the fate of many of my adventure maps. Despite this fact, I never really felt so bad about leaving anything behind, or ever gave much thought to how far a new project would get. I was simply captured, always occupied, always creating something. I may not have had what it took to build castles, but these tools made me think I could. From Shadow of Israfel to Zelda to Portal to Captain Sparkle's animations, transforming existing things into my own, assembling original concepts from the things I liked, was the simplest thing to do in my mind. Seeing the undrawn illustrations, hearing the unspoken words and unsung songs, it was easy to think that worlds already existed in my head. It just had to be a cruel fact that to extract them took magic, the work of adults whose expertise and organization I could not comprehend attaining myself. The gap between the things I could draw and the drawings I liked, the drawings in my head, an infinite distance. Minecraft was a bridge into my dreams, a substitute for magic, access to realization, but also, with enough time, maybe a glimpse past the curtain. What were those big things really made of? What was it about them that I wanted so much for myself? We weren't close to an answer, but maybe we were on the path. Early on, I was getting a lot of YouTube direct messages, a thing that no longer exists, asking me to animate for a Minecraft parody song. Some were kind of high profile, but most were just other kids who wrote a script for a song and wanted somebody else to bring it to life for them, to do the part that was magic. Me and my friends had thought about doing a parody. We had the tools now, but it never came together. Another thing that needed more planning than we had. One random day, on a whim, I went to those direct messages and picked one. I got a loose plan on what to do, which was, of course, handle the entire animation myself. Could I do 3 minutes? What I think made this project work was me getting the finished song from the music artist in advance. Something that maybe only a year prior would have seemed like magic was now something I was going to do. It's long enough ago that I'm not sure if I was either confident or worried, but I don't remember struggling much. I'd have dropped the song onto a timeline, divided it by its lyrics, made sense of the story being told, placed key moments during the chorus, and wherever time seemed cloudy, like a story beat didn't need all the time it was given, I would just improvise ways to keep the characters busy until the timeline was full. And of course, making the world back in the game was pretty easy when it was just a stage I would provide context to as I went. For my ability, conditions were ideal. This video is banned, by the way. Not banned as in removed from YouTube, banned is just the name of the song. And what the story is about? It's a parody of Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus, and it has 20 million views. Checked a few boxes for going viral in 2013, I guess. I recall reception found the story confusing, and yeah, but not so much criticism regarding animation quality. Must mean it was perfect! Or just that kids weren't really concerned with the art so much. Of course, I would be worried about it. Over time, I did a couple other projects of similar nature, working off of sound material to create a longer video. Not parodies though, just more Let's Play remakes. And despite nothing about the tools or requirements for the results changing much, it was getting harder to work on. In doing so many shorts, in starting more things than I finished, repeating a similar task over and over, all the thought I'd have to give to organizing something larger instead got channeled into the depth of something specific, and so I became more critical, my artistic eye improved, I couldn't just pose the puppets or place blocks wherever anymore. Every little scene across the timeline of a longer project was not so easy to just go and do now that I saw the level of depth it could hold, the many ways it could be. There would have been times where I just defaulted to an easy idea to prevent myself from getting stuck, but I wouldn't be too happy about it. I had spent enough time with these tools now to start judging my creations more. I think I was beginning to learn that I may not have really been a true animator or an architect, rather just a fan, with enough external motivations to push through. But I couldn't think to believe something like that. The tools of my dreams were in my hands and worked like toys. I had to use them. It was nice to have a system for results, but the castle town needs better results. I wasn't sure what to do, but what I was sure of was that pumping out fan animations for YouTubers I was quickly outgrowing, and cranking out Let's Plays I was never very interested in, were things that had to go. It was a good call, but it was never the main obstacle. We were avoiding the steeper side of all curves, mistaking the shallow end of new curves for our desired progress. There is still motion in a jump made horizontally. Minecraft stuff still happened, but there would be more leaps into new territory. I bought some equipment and software to try and do 2D animation, which would be a lot harder than posing puppets and placing blocks, but I had a workflow from my 3D projects I could borrow, and smaller ideas that made it less scary. It's a different beast, and in drawing I was out of practice, but I wasn't bringing my critical eye to it yet. It was new, and thus allowed to be fun. A barrier of magic I could cross without going mad. I imagine I picked up 2D animation because I assumed it would be the easier medium for some undefined but inevitable animated series. A big thing I would eventually do because of course, and making a couple memes was warm-up. As for Minecraft, the endless variety seemed like it was starting to get used up. Most of my interest left only in the creative things I couldn't easily do, couldn't map to a timeline with instructions set in advance. The innate joys of placing and measuring the blocks had been mostly overwritten by a need to move blocks with purpose. If I wanted to play with a toy again, it would be easier if it weren't a sandbox. I got pretty into the competitive shooter game Counter-Strike Global Offensive, a game replaced by its sequel, which is where I get footage from. It's very serious and calculated, a challenging game with a very long road to mastery. A game for certain, not a sandbox, but a game where the game board, the maps you would play on, were not always made by the developers themselves. There were tools for members of the Counter-Strike community to make their own maps, usually just for fun, although with extraordinary positive reception, they could end up integrating into the primary game itself. I would have no aspirations for that realm, but I did want to mess with the tools and see if I understood Counter-Strike well enough to design a nice map, even if I wouldn't be able to meaningfully test it. As an iMac user, those tools would not work on my computer without workarounds I wasn't confident in setting up. So it looked like I had yet another excuse to return home. Despite being more realistic in appearance, Counter-Strike is still a game, and the design of its play space is governed by specific rules. Maybe a level takes place at a nuclear power plant, but building a nuclear power plant is not the same thing as building a Counter-Strike level. Just as chess has its checkered board, and basketball has its court with all these lines on the ground, Counter-Strike is a series of lanes and angles that flow together towards key positions of its objective. The terrorist team, T-side, has a couple minutes to plant a bomb at one of two locations, and counter-terrorists, CT side, have to stop them. Or if the bomb is planted, defuse the bomb. Planting and defusing is mostly just an animation that takes time to carry out, the core gameplay being in pointing guns down corridors in the right place and at the right time. With 2 bomb sites, 5 players per team, and CT starting closer to the bomb sites, it means that CT side plays an uneven defense while T side tries to exploit it to the best of their ability, switching to defense if they get their bomb planted, while the CTs quickly try to come up with the best way to retake the bomb site. How balanced the game is, meaning how likely it is that equally skilled teams manage a 50-50 score, depends very heavily on the shape of the level. Is the map I built a good Counter-Strike map? I don't think so. There are lanes connecting the spawn points and bomb sites, but they may be too short. Maps are small, but picking a position should require a time commitment, and not grant too much power to one side when controlled. There are too many angles and not much thought given to them. Every angle should have a level of predictability within the mind game. Some of these angles are too strong, too weak, or just redundant for the sake of implying detail. This bomb site I built looks like whack-a-mole, the opposite of smart Counter-Strike map design. The map is not good, but I imagine I did my best. It seems to have followed the rules at least, even if execution was bad. This was not a big map, but it is maybe through application of those particular rules, for it to be good, or attempt to be good, required a certain thoughtfulness that was newer to our blocks. This thoughtfulness usually paralyzes us, but at this scale it was easily manageable. Aside from the main objectives, I think the aesthetics of the build are kind of cute in a specific way. In being a more realistically styled game, it has to give the appearance of being in the real world, but unlike the real world, it has to have unnatural boundaries. It can't all be playable, and so some of the world doesn't need a full realization. None of these unplayable buildings in my Minecraft map have real interiors, and only feature walls that are visible from the play space, similar to what is done in Counter-Strike. Distant details falling in quality, and the seams of existence extending only as far as could be naturally observed. I say it's cute because the facade isn't really trying very hard. In fact, I almost think it might be trying to draw attention to itself.
Look, I'm obviously fake, just like in Counter-Strike.
Another funny thing, like with the portal map where I discarded the nature of Minecraft in favor of another, there is this one section meant to be like a cramped tunnel or air vent that is 1.5 blocks tall. Counter-Strike sometimes has spaces you need to crouch to fit into, and while Minecraft has crouching, it served a different purpose than lowering your height, so entering this space was impossible. I say was because in current Minecraft, crouching now does lower your height, and you can walk in here. This map was never intended to be played. It couldn't be, and I knew that, but it was happy to pretend, to imagine. Was Minecraft the tool I thought allowed me to extract my dreams now just another dreaming instrument? Not if I could help it. Could I convert the map data into a model for Counter-Strike, like I could do for animation, or perhaps bring more Counter-Strike into Minecraft? I came up with the idea for an adventure map loosely inspired by Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike does not have a single-player mode. The experience of the game is tightly connected to being engaged with other people, but it wouldn't stop me from wondering about how its raw fundamentals could be applied to a different set of rules. What if chess had layouts where you needed to pass a checkered gauntlet of semi-random pieces with a preset deck of your own? What if basketball had holes in the floor with moles popping out of them, which granted powers to the ball when whacked? What if the careful navigation and precise execution of Counter-Strike combat were applied to a linear narrative? The story of this map would be that you awaken in some kind of facility as a soldier without any memories, and placed into a training simulation by robots to prepare for some kind of mission. It teaches you the mechanics for fighting and managing fall damage, and then after it seems to end, you get sent to a location full of skeletons to fight. You carefully sweep through some hallways, shooting each skeleton you find until you are eventually met with a target who has your own name and needs to be assassinated. If you try to back out, something stops you, and when you do try to shoot down the construction above the target, it turns out it was all part of the simulation, and your real mission is about to begin. You are merely being tested for loyalty. It also turns out you work for the Ender Dragon or something. I think it was intended that you would go on a real mission, something would go wrong, then you would join forces with the real good guys, and attack the place you came from? I don't know, because, surprise, it isn't complete. But this would probably be my most creative and well-polished map yet. The build certainly didn't need to be very big when the focus was on creating gameplay similar in feeling to Counter-Strike, nor did it need much detail when the more important thing was the shape of a location, how your eyes follow its paths and its edges, guiding your aim. The only ranged weapon in Minecraft at the time was the bow, and skeletons were the ranged enemy. So I had to try and make fighting skeletons and using the bow feel like Counter-Strike somehow. I didn't want to use gun mods for accessibility reasons. More people will play the game if it takes less work to set it up. And even if I wanted mods, I probably would have wanted to go custom, but that means programming, writing code, which among all the art skills had to be the deepest and most impenetrable magic of all, so the built-in stuff would have to work somehow. The best I could do was lock skeletons in place, since the only alternative was allowing them to rush you, which is very much the opposite of taking cover or holding an angle. Why did that skeleton slow peek me? Did they change how they work? Both you and the skeleton would have to die in one hit with how long it takes to fire arrows. Counter-Strike kill time is fast. The changing of accuracy between standing still and walking could somewhat be resembled through the fact that drawing a bow slowed your movement speed. You could run around corners and then draw, or creep around and draw in advance. Whether it was better to walk drawn or run undrawn would depend on whether you knew where a skeleton was, and or if the skeleton knew where you were. If a skeleton knows about you and you slowly try to creep around the corner, it might just shoot you first. It might be a good idea to quickly poke out of a corner for a moment to bait an arrow, and then go for a shot. It was far from the complexity of Counter-Strike, but respected the nature of Minecraft, and could find variety through the shape of the build, and in theory the layering of additional mechanics we could implement in later levels. Replaying this map, I found it pretty fun. Even if I still somewhat knew where all the enemy positions were, it was also cool to see all the effects and micro-events I arranged to be managed by command blocks, blocks that held very simple instructions to execute, modifying the layout, removing gates, setting barriers, respawning new skeletons along the way. This map was actually broken in my first attempts to showcase it. New versions of Minecraft changed the formatting for the instructions that would be written in the command blocks, so if any of the operations of the map were going to work again, I would have to fix it. Originally I was just going to show footage of things like the transforming rooms in the simulation totally breaking apart and not working, but I really liked that effect, and figured it couldn't be too hard to just find all the instructions and rewrite them to fire properly. The instructions were supposed to teleport you a certain relative distance away from yourself, perfectly inserting you into a perfectly identical looking location with slight differences to give the appearance of the world slightly transforming, of blocks moving around. I wanted to see the illusion again. So I learned the new language and fixed the command blocks that held the teleport instructions. Once fixed, it immediately led to another issue. All the target dummies in the simulation were missing. In making the map, I was placing the dummies by hand rather than automating them with command block instructions. Every time I tested the game, it would be impossible to play again until I manually moved all the pieces back in place. Maybe not so bad if I didn't know where I wanted the dummies to be located yet. Rewriting the instructions every time I wanted to adjust something would have been a little tedious, but in planning to fix this, I knew where the targets were supposed to go. There was no choice. I went to the trouble of arranging commands to set and reset dummies, and when I went to find their intended positions, they were simply obvious. The shape of the hallways and their obstructions made it clear precisely where they should be. The combat was nothing without the map. They only worked as part of a whole. None of the maps I can show you in this video will ever have me telling you it's totally perfect. And I could tear some of those older projects to shreds, but I really like this one. I couldn't help but go on to fix everything that didn't work and improve it. I made labels to identify what command blocks did what. I reworked how the inventory was managed so that oversights around losing items were less likely. And most importantly of all, I introduced new instructions for the map to reset itself so that there was no need to step out of bounds and reset all the dominoes after they fell. I think I nearly had as much fun organizing all this magic text as I did placing the blocks it was written to serve. Even now I kinda wonder about how I might scale the intended size of this project down into something I could wrap up. You didn't need 100 levels for this to be good. The next project was another Zelda map, where I gave up at the castle town again. I mean, it was pretty much the same thing as before, only prettier. Why did I do this again? I thought I was a better builder, a smarter builder, and had more ideas for command block stuff to do. My man, none of those things were the issue. You know what was actually responsible for starting this one? I was doing teleporter tricks in the Counter-Strike map and thought, hang on, I can position and rotate the player wherever I want to put them? That means I can make cutscenes! Cutscenes are a thing in the big stuff I like. You know what that means? It's time to take another shot at a colossal project with no plan to reasonably complete. The main thing this map has going for it is cutscenes. Looking back at it now, I didn't realize it was basically the only thing going on here. There's a sequence where your position gets locked and command blocks carry you around like a camera to look at some story stuff in an abstract setting. I walk around a linear area, stepping into a black wall that mimics a loading zone, not actually being one, and it takes me to a village which I get an exposition shot for. I open a chest and it plays something of a Zelda chest opening, putting an armor stand in my place to look like I'm watching myself from the third person receiving a prize. There isn't much else before we run out of stuff to engage with. I should have made 5 Nights at Herobrine's or something. Anything where these cutscene tricks would better shine. The canvas of the Counter-Strike project was focused enough that its bounds could be cut down, the final painting missing nothing if the empty space was trimmed. But this Zelda project can't do that. It expected its primary feature to be a piece of something undefined. There would be a lot of work left to do if it were similarly trimmed. What happened to the supposed animated series we were thinking we were going to do a while ago? Well, it was sitting higher up a curve that we weren't climbing. And I guess the blocks still stack. It's clear that despite trimming all the junk from our creative routines, the faster rewards for dabbling was undefeated. Only unlike before the era of repetition, we had now grown disappointed whenever a project of greater scope died out. We were having fun, making the things we wanted to make, but we couldn't appreciate them. The cohesion of the Counter-Strike map and the polish of the Zelda map were products of actually giving a darn, but still had to be servants of something bigger. By this point, I think I'm starting to get upset. I had a lot of started and unfinished projects, many of which were intended to be big but never got close. It's been fun to mess around, but I'm convinced that I should have the capacity to make a big thing. I've clearly gained experience and done so much all over the place that if all the parts of everything I'd ever done served one goal, then surely the big thing would have been done. I just need to focus on one thing. Start and don't quit. I'd felt so compelled when I started things. There must be a way to endure, to craft a project so captivating that I couldn't drop it. Whatever this project would be, we'd be using the blocks. It had to be the blocks. I wasn't so foolish as to believe I could single-handedly replicate the production of a studio with 100 artists, but with the right tool and the right canvas, perhaps you could squint your eyes and trick yourself into thinking so. Not just that you could replicate the work, but that it was what you had to do to produce something worthy.
Oops.
Past 2016, there is one more Minecraft animation project that would be reworked and restarted over and over. This may be a generous interpretation, it may have actually been several projects, but it recycles enough material with each approach that it's kinda hard to tell where one version starts and another begins. I can make clear distinctions based on where Herobrine gets put. I turn Herobrine into an original character alongside a mostly consistent original cast. Sometimes everyone is friends, sometimes they're all enemies. Sometimes Herobrine is a person, and other times he's a mysterious force of nature. Either way, each project using them was all part of the same attempt to make a big thing, an animated series or something like a movie. I didn't really explain what a Herobrine is, but in early Minecraft there was a popular ghost story about some entity haunting the game which looked like Steve only with white eyes. People like to do creative stuff with Herobrine all the time, usually making him into some kind of evil god, but my favorite rendition had to be Gods Don't Bleed by Dilongu, a 2 to 3 minute animation where Herobrine is the king of monsters whose godhood is questioned and rebelled against by his own. There's not really a story. He sits on a throne, monsters try to ambush him, and he sweeps the floor. It isn't a close fight, but it's also not futile enough. Maybe a little bit of story in there, I guess. It's a fight! It's cool, and that's all it has to be. I'm sure this video was made with the same understanding that all the dedicated stick figure animators have. The spectacle of motion has power on its own. I wanted this for myself, but I also wanted more, to hit harder, and maybe have some character to hold on to, a narrative, something that aligned with the vague and loosely defined sense of big that I was after. The first project idea was to try and make a fake Let's Play of a fake game, specifically a cinematic third-person cover shooter. I like doing animations that mimic the appearance of gameplay, and cover shooters have a good variety of stuff to reference and translate, from the fundamentals of player movement to the events and overarching structure of levels. Like with Counter-Strike, the shape of the map was important to making everything else work, and while I would make most of it in Minecraft, I left room to do more custom things in Blender. I had a tutorial portion animated, as well as a few steps into the world, but I wouldn't get too far without finishing the build. In making the map, I would be metering out the introduction of features, new weapons, and new enemies. This room you'd get this, and this room you'd get that. It would have played out like a gameplay reveal at E3, but probably look more like a tech demo. This was a great idea! It would teach me that visual spectacle can't carry as hard as I thought for the scope I envisioned. In order for this project to be interesting for longer than a single minute, it would have had to be more than just a thinly spread series of mechanical references to cover shooters with a good guys versus bad guys story, and that was mostly all I had. Kind of a shame we couldn't settle for that lone minute. There are a lot of clever things you could do in imagining a Minecraft cover shooter, thinking of the ways in which the fundamentals of both might have a relationship together. Like, cover as a game thing is an exclusive state. You're in it or you're out of it. Out of it, you can move around more freely, but in cover, you're locked to the surface you're on. The trade-off is that you can easily look around corners without being exposed and set your aim direction safely in advance. The predetermined arrangement of cover in a level determines the challenge, but in Minecraft, you can build stuff, so the nature of a cover shooter would be entirely changed. Think about how defending a position would work if among the enemy were creepers. They could explode if not dealt with and destroy cover, forcing you to retreat. There are transformative things you could do here, but that wasn't my plan. I wanted my own Gears of War, and the blocks had no place in it other than to put it on screen. There would be guns and grenades, because I didn't need bows, and I didn't need programming to make a game through animation. Minecraft was the bridge, and nothing more. Once I put it together, that 10 minutes, or worse, a movie-length Let's Play mimic animation would have become pretty repetitive to work on. I grasped for whatever was more compelling once again. It didn't matter if this animation could technically be fully mapped out like my older work, it would have taken too long to render. Maybe it would have been a cool thing to have had done, but if the blocks were reaching their limits for how much time they could save on a dream project, I needed a dream project that was worthy of the time, and this wasn't it. For a few months, we'd be doing more horizontal hops before coming up with a plan that would let me try to salvage things from this animation for a newer one that felt like it was actually capable of momentum. Fall 2017, attempt number 2, has Herobrine and this other guy as prisoners in some kind of stone city being attacked by an army of zombie pigmen. They would manage an escape, but be confused for allies by the forces protecting the city, and Herobrine, not going anywhere without dealing with the chaos, plays along while the other guy runs off to some unknown scheme. The story would be pretty similar, only now instead of serving a fake game, it would motivate something closer to my inspirations, a gods don't bleed kind of project. I think it was going to be something of a nature versus industry kind of story, and maybe Herobrine was a reluctant protector in a world betrayed by its people. There isn't a lot of documentation, and the builds only imply so much. I'd get a relatively fair amount of animation done for this one, but like before, only in isolated locations away from the main map, the main set piece, which I'd be working on in parallel. Not a great sign. No matter what, the appeal of the project would be in epic battles I would justify in reverse, and in coming up with a loose outline on what they might look like and where they might be, I figured the main city would be a place that gets returned to multiple times in the story. Herobrine fights the pig army, Herobrine fights the human army. I didn't know precisely what the fights were going to be made of, but I figured if I just set a stage, they could sprout forth through my typical improv routines. If the project is going to take a lot of time, then let's play to our strengths, right? Not as clever as I thought. I'd end up stuck in a process of scaling up the city over and over, procrastinating on the task of animation and meaningfully filling the empty space of the story by just stretching the existing parts of the image instead. I built the biggest thing and decided it needed a shadow to be cast over it, to become a foreground element to the true horizon. No spire was ever the highest. I towered up so high, drove things towards a peak that felt final, and then I again imagined it only being at the foot of the real city. What are we doing, man? I have these introduction sections that are pretty solid, and then I have this castle town. It's the Zelda maps again. I was afraid to do anything with the space, so I just kept extending the space, and that felt like progress. All I had to do was click on some squares and the theoretical castle would get bigger and bigger. If I wanted a big animation, it just needed a big set, like the music parody. I told myself I wanted it, but connecting the isolated and low-context intro animations to something real, I had to escape from that. What if I filled the space and it wasn't good enough? Was I really interested in castles? In 2018, I had started to see about getting into animation professionally, and the further I got, the more reasons I found to worry that if I became a real animator, maybe I would not have the time or motivation to ever make anything of my own again. Obviously, I didn't dream of animating, I dreamt of animation. If there was any way to bring forth an animated series or movie single-handedly, I was desperate to find it. Early 2019, attempt number 3, the overworld is being corrupted by the end dimension, and a villager possessing a command block tries to find someone capable of using it in order to save the world. They would find Herobrine hidden in a secret lair underneath a club, and attempt to give it to him in hopes he would help. This was the wrong choice, and the government already knew that, and was tracking them. Herobrine learns the block can make other people like him and take the power away. He tries to dispose of the cube, but his minion turns on him and snatches it for a moment before getting owned. Herobrine tries taking it again, but then gets surrounded by dozens of soldiers and temporarily surrenders before realizing there are others who could use the block against him. And then it's gods don't bleed time. Or it would be if I ever started animating it. This was probably the best setup yet. This could be in episode 1. A little exposition and then a big fight that the characters have to scramble the cube for, and whatever follows decided later. Even the build was complete. Instead of inviting the epic battle to cover an endless city, I trapped it in a box, surrounded by things confirmed as either background elements or things with deliberate purpose. This time I had arranged all the pieces, the setting, the narrative, and the characters all to precisely serve a chaotic stick figure throwdown. All I had to do was pose the puppets and let the blocks flow. We designed the project to let it work that way. We could build this castle town. Why didn't we? Not good enough. Of course it was not good enough. It might have been cool. It might have been fun. But I was sure that if I went through with it, it would have only been just another Minecraft animation. And I wanted more. It was a dream project after all. It needed to explode! To go toe-to-toe with the best and be no contest. To cure cancer and make world peace. How have things wound up like this? We have ideas that work, that are fun. Is fun not allowed? How have we wound up with such impossible standards? A few months later, halfway into 2019, we get attempt 4. This would need new builds altogether to align with a heavily revised story, one with much greater focus on character. Something I was sure had to be the soul of a bigger project that I had yet to harness. Once again, a villager is bringing a command block to Herobrine, but not to ask for his help. Herobrine is in stasis in a high-tech prison, and the many new gods of Minecraft have sought a way to destroy him. The command block will power a weapon to annihilate him, but not if a small group of rebels don't sabotage the process to free him first. The world has grown accustomed to the power of gods, a terrible new order under their reign, the destructive output of common weapons now too much for the future to endure. To resist, these rebels choose to fight fire with fire. This time we would make our fights not just stick figure battles, but demonstrations of character. The way in which the mortals and the gods fight, against or alongside each other, would define them both. Some things only a god can do, but some things only a mortal can. Whatever the future holds for this world, it would be born of what they teach each other, for better or worse. I had never invested so much preparation into a project until now. Was it finally good enough? This project would be half 2D, half 3D. I would draw the characters, but still be building the world in the game. I wasn't good enough to do backgrounds, I still needed the blocks. When I started some test animations, while I was pretty happy with the quality I could produce, I was demoralized by the pace. It still would have taken a long time to complete. Why did this have to be an issue if we liked the project? Was it not at last worthy? The truth is that even still, the story was missing too much to act on. Again, there were sets making implications, but the pitch I just offered is basically all of the substance. Nothing more than broad strokes. Maybe I'm just a fraud? We haven't seen the last of my Minecraft stuff, but this is the last animation project. There would be no further attempts, but we would never admit to quitting. It was just on pause forever, for as long as daydreams continued to play with it. This had to be the fault of the blocks. There's a reason most work done for all of these was in the build. We were not creating, we were dreaming. Online, I had shared pictures of one of these builds from these projects, and a comment asked, why not build them in Blender? The answer is because Minecraft is the game. Each of these plans were basically just excuses to play the game. There was never much done outside of it. It's just a shame that Minecraft is also an art form because I am clearly not an artist. Just a player, too aware of the fact that these blocks become a fiction after they are placed, and I could not unsee it. I liked the blocks for their power to make up a castle, but I couldn't see the blocks without one anymore. What the castles of the blocks lacked, what was absent from my creations, was life. This was something I had to give it, and I didn't know how. I thought life could simply emerge from the builds by nature, and in a way they did, but only as ghosts without a precise identity. I had to capture them, but I refused to try. How could I ever place a single stroke of paint on a canvas, solidify an identity, knowing that to commit to anything is to lose the infinity, so malleable as to never be bad? In trading precision for scale, Minecraft accommodates the infinite. These castles may be vacant of observable life, but not of the ghosts of the imagination, of infinite lives, of the dream. The original 2D animated series I had thought up before has nearly nothing to show for it, and that is because I did not want to make it. I wanted to imagine it, to let it live in my mind where it could be perfect, something it could only be through non-existence. If it is not born, it cannot be harmed and cannot die. Minecraft was no bridge. It was just a cruel trick that made me dream harder, and reality is no match for the dream. No project could ever be worthy. I don't think giving a teenager who is already pretty egotistical the ability to easily create worlds and a YouTube channel with subscribers was very good for his brain. What he ought to figure out, but won't find out soon, maybe even has yet to figure out, and I wish I could because it would make this video a lot easier, is that he doesn't need things that are big. Just things that are whole. All his concern over the imperfections of these projects relate to the details. He wants big things, but his judgment of them is more focused on how well they are put together. Making every piece matter when the whole is too much would make deciding on those particular pieces a lot harder, knowing how many other things they need to tie into. I think we've said this already. If there is any way to make big things that are good, it will depend on his ability to be precise. And if he wants to get good at being precise, he should get good at choosing something. Anything, even if it's bad. Back in 2018, he made a meme animation that is completely nonsensical and full of pieces that don't tie together, which by his standard should have made it the farthest thing from worthy, and yet he woke up early and stayed up late for it, nearly avoiding meals, did nothing but work on it for 40 days straight. He may have had a less than passionate motive that year for making things, but I remember it literally threw him off the ground just to think about it. It gave him life. It was a project that was born and completed among many things that didn't get anywhere. I don't know if that video made him a better artist, but if there's any way to figure out how to grant life to worlds, maybe he should start by finding worlds that grant life to him. In 2020, about half a year away from my last record of work towards the animated series, I started what would be my last adventure map. One that before anything else was fun, and while incomplete, managed to become more whole than most projects up to that point, a result of better respect for the resolution of the canvas, of Minecraft, and of my own. While my attitudes from the animated series contributed to its creation, it is more so the culmination of other in-game projects on a parallel timeline, one that also culminates towards my last Minecraft project in 2022. While we were progressively going crazier and crazier, insisting that we needed to make, and were capable of making through the powers of the blocks, a big animation, I did still own Minecraft as a game. There were the things meant for my ascension, or whatever, but there were plenty of other activities that we would admit were strictly for play, or at least try for. I have lots of survival worlds from that time period where I did little more than the internal survival objectives. Gear up, find treasure, beat the dragon. Turns out even years after my Minecraft obsession began, it was still fun to place blocks and dig tunnels, whether for the numbers or its own sake. The builds made here would be strictly practical. I didn't want to build castles. Good builds belonged to fictions, required to be inhabited by something I was struggling to bring forth, and didn't want to think about, but couldn't help much. Each of these worlds had weird names which seemed to imply that I was not happy to be starting another survival world, almost reading like warnings. If you create another world, you will never escape. That had to be clear. None of the goals of these worlds were without a time commitment. Minecraft isn't special for its ability to use time. All games have done that. I just felt shame when I wasn't using Minecraft for its more worthy purpose of manifesting dreams. There would, however, be a game part of Minecraft I did not feel bad about dumping dozens of hours into. A creative multiplayer minigame. The time has come to talk about Hypixel housing. Ever since the very beginning, among the many kinds of multiplayer servers you could join were creative plot servers, ones where you were granted creative mode and build permission restricted to a square of land you could do whatever you wanted with. It's a very easy and accessible way to build stuff and show it to other players without going through the trouble of setting up your own multiplayer server or hosting a download of your map somewhere online. You don't get much room in these creative plots, but that's the trade-off. What Hypixel has to offer in all of its minigames is already a very custom experience, so creative plots would have their own unique qualities too. Housing didn't begin with much, and it required you to unlock or pay for build materials in larger plot sizes, but it also had things like modified pressure plates that could be placed in sequence to create a timed parkour challenge with checkpoints. With my special YouTuber rank on the server, I had access to basically all housing features, but would also get a lot of attention if I had a public build open. This meant I could subject the players of Hypixel housing to whatever I desired. I don't have much record of my early days in housing. You obviously don't get to keep multiplayer worlds for yourself without modding tools that I hadn't discovered yet, but I have some pictures. Wasn't much different from the old Planet Minecraft stuff. It was just whatever could be built fast enough to keep people busy, letting them join WoW I built. One build, the players were very bad at my jumps, so I made it super easy. And then everyone was winning too fast, and when people won a housing parkour, they wanted you to give them a local housing rank, which didn't do anything, but you could grant them flight or build permissions. Obviously, there's only one reward that can be reasonably granted without causing problems, but unlike modern housing, you couldn't automate this process and had to manually change the rank of every player, which forced you to find them physically in the house and punch them to get a menu screen with their info. Fed up with managing the constant player requests, I decided to give everyone flight, and that made some of them mad, because flying cancels your parkour timer, and that was funny, so I also decided to delete the house right in front of them before leaving for the day. I built a few more parkour houses, coming up with more interesting constructions each time. I was just doing what I used to do, only under heavy constraints and the incentive of being able to watch players live and make design choices around them in real time. The most pictures I have from that era are mainly of bugs. Housing was still in beta stages. Once I spent half an hour trying to show someone a jump they couldn't do because the client and server-side builds didn't match. Their jump was impossible and mine wasn't. One time it seemed like I could build out of the plot bounds for some reason, and despite my effort to not look like I was cheating, I accidentally built too high. So when they fixed the bug, my high-up blocks became a permanent part of the outer housing area. I had to make a request to get some help removing it. They opted to just give me extended build permissions for outside the plot boundaries, but I chose not to use it. Maybe I was just worried about crossing a line with the administrators if I got too carried away. Why wouldn't I step out of bounds otherwise? This was a creative space now, no? Why not go big? This question would come later. With each build, I would try to pack more stuff into it than the last. It had to be a 51 block square, which isn't much, but there are efficient and non-efficient ways to use it if the goal was not to waste space and or keep players playing as long as possible. If I had to manually grant rewards to everyone who completed my parkour challenge, then it would be nice if I had to do it less often. This resulted in builds that were difficult or confusing or misleading. Sometimes I make the room impossible to understand without a lot of trial and error, or I fill it with jumps that require some technical precision to perform. Sometimes I create a path, but it's actually impossible to follow, the real progression requiring a thorough investigation of the environment. One of my favorite tricks was creating a circle of identical rooms that lead back into itself, with just the right construction to trap anyone not paying enough attention. It's kind of absurd that it actually worked on some players. It's obviously a strange series of rooms. A consequence of making things too difficult or confusing is that players would sometimes get upset, even begging for help and filling the screen with messages. I was running these things by myself, so I had to handle every issue. The next change to the builds was to make them easy to finish, but require a fast completion time in order to be rewarded. That way the whole build could be seen by most players, I didn't have to help anyone, and I still didn't have to hand out too many rewards. Our ideal housing build was taking shape. I don't know how involved or interested players were in what I created, what with the blinding power of the YouTuber rank, but I know I liked it. Hypixel housing was fun. It imposed some creative goals that were easy to manage, and for me, it was quickly rewarding. A common comment from players when they joined was to ask how many levels there were. Often, parkour houses would be built off a formula where the space was divided into a grid with mostly distinct jumps in each of them. Those tiny little rooms they would call a level. One whole level! And so it would be that many parkours could easily claim over 100 levels. I wouldn't be building with that metric in mind. I preferred to frame my houses as one micro-adventure. If there was a story or text of any kind, it didn't really matter or serve to emphasize progress in the challenge. If there was a space I didn't know exactly what to do with, I could just plop down anything, because the space was small enough that it didn't take too many blocks before blocks would create a shape, which then created a structure, which then created a purpose, and finally an identity. I could improvise, and the result was either good or easy to replace. Every second step informed by the first, and the bigger picture the last thing to matter. Until it did. I liked building houses where later parts would let you look back and observe your progress, but this also risked letting you look up from the start and observe where you might go. One of the last housing projects was given a little micro-narrative like usual, but this one had windows into the future, of an area you would get to near the end, something that would be climactic. In order to serve that climax, I would need to manage the ascent, the bigger picture, and I could have just said, whatever, it's not worth overthinking, but I did. Each new house was something new and often something better, so we were moving up a curve. This was inevitable. Housing was an acceptable Minecraft activity since it draws out creativity, but it was still a game, and if we were repeating ourselves, if we weren't progressing towards something better, then we were just playing, and play had to be less valuable than creation. As usual, it was a lot easier for us to make a horizontal hop than confront the perfectionism that loomed over every pursuit, so that was what we did. Somehow we thought it would be a good idea to try and start a new big adventure map. The idea was to create the equivalent of an open world full of Hypixel house parkours of their own theme and self-contained micro-stories that I could loosely tie together in one bigger story. That way I could continue my fun housing parkour activity, but also be working on something worthy of the time. If I was struggling for any reason, I could just float somewhere else and do something new. And if I had nothing in mind, I could just come back another day. I started this project to escape from procrastinating on another one. But there is no way it wasn't going to suffer the same fate. In fact, the greater scale just meant it was going to crash even harder. I was still under the impression that the main obstacle was finding the right project. If it was serious enough, the difficult space would find a way to be filled. I would simply lock in once the right conditions were met. We were unintentionally fighting between our desire for play, from which all of our momentum was coming from, and the intent to only give time and effort to something that felt more worthy than play alone. It would be between the third and last Heroine projects that we started to mess around with this idea. I would spend a long time going through the tedious process of generating and printing a map for an 8,000 block square world, with modded land generation reverting terrain to its older Minecraft appearance, supposedly easier for inspiration, but also blank enough to make it easy to pave over for custom things. Starting off, we built something similar to our survival world shelters and injected a very simple story. Herobrine made everyone disappear, and now you need to travel the world to collect a bunch of artifacts. Who knows what for, but each little quest around the world would have an artifact, so that binds everything together. Now we just need to build stuff. The plan was to litter the map in islands of a sort. There would be isolated constructions dedicated to its own specific challenge, and maybe a micro-story that leads to an artifact, with the rest of the space full of medium and small constructs for food or other optional collectibles. The medium builds would serve as landmarks to help you memorize the map and not get lost as you wandered the space in whatever direction you chose, while the smaller constructs would do the same thing for the poor lads on email laptops with short render distances. I barely started this thing. I couldn't bear to think about this web I wanted to draw over this map without immediately thinking about the whole. I couldn't help but want to further develop its fiction, organize all the directions, and open worlds are a nightmare for accomplishing that. Very short-lived hop. The last Herobrine animation came and stalled, and then following that, we would not return to this project. But I did still wish for the momentum of my parkour blocks. If what helped the Hypixel houses get done was the inevitability of filling the space, then I needed similar constraints. A bigger plot size only made choices harder to make. Instead of an open world then, maybe we have a linear project that is just long. Keep all the same principles, but trade the endless direction for one. It would still be big and worthy, but far smarter in execution. Pages is the last adventure map. The world has been cursed, such that all life is spontaneously being converted into paper, while indestructible barriers entrap all regions of the world, slowly isolating everyone who remains. Very convenient design. You are among the last people left. The last things that will ever be done are also the last things you do. If the world can be saved, it's on you. You start near a massive pillar, distinct but similar to the barriers, in a land shaved of its detail with no one around, the last breath of even the animals all transformed into text. Previous travelers left notes on a theory of what might be done to save the world. Notes I did not write, the story and world are incomplete, but there is much to see. Perhaps if you were to seek out all the temples of the animal gods and acquire their magic artifacts, the game collectible, and offer them to this pillar, maybe there would be hope? I recall some idea where touching it would make you enter some kind of alternate realm where a ghost god of the relevant species would wordlessly commune with you, but I'm not sure why. Probably because I had an idea for a cheap but cool visual. Not all of the artifacts would rest in their temples. In attempting to fight or escape the curse, others would seize them, either to try and fulfill the same plan, or cling to them in hopes of being saved by another theory of their function. No one has a clue what the deal is with these things. Another convenience in design. As for the gameplay, you're a parkour guy. The whole map is focused around parkour, of course. Some of it is easy to intuit, but some of it isn't. Either way, in order to get anywhere, you have to find some blocks you can jump to among the ones you can't. If you can get somewhere, it's probably the right way to go, or it leads to an optional secret, or the endpoint of an unlockable shortcut path to allow easier backtracking. All the space between the walls serves the parkour, or is vacant. Vacant, but acceptable to traverse. Most adventure maps that use the generated world often depend on honor. Please don't go wandering away. This map has walls, but they're placed pretty far apart to preserve the feeling of a formerly living world. You can go anywhere it is possible for you to reach, and with block placing disabled, you can't pass these walls, but you can wander around these fields and these trees. Maybe I could find a place to get stuck? A gap in the treetops? A cave with no way out? Nope. As natural as this world may appear, it has been through the process of having all grass and trees removed, the landscape smoothed, all holes and caves filled or sealed, then all grass and trees replanted, a process sped up with the World Edit mod tools, and then all carefully inspected for any possible position you would need to cheat to get out of. This would have been so much work in the open world, but confined by these walls, it was far more reasonable to control. Everyone turning into paper was a simple choice to contextualize there being no NPCs NPCs, non-player characters. Maybe it is easier today, but at the time, making characters that do things in the game world that aren't just the generic behavior of Minecraft creatures, you had to be a wizard. Most adventure maps don't have anyone to interact with because Minecraft just isn't like that. Maps that did feature custom characters were usually very limited or gimmicky, and it was kind of immersion breaking. That's a funny concept, isn't it? Immersion? Minecraft? Yes, not in the sense that you believe it is real, but that you don't believe it is a performance. You walk around the world of Minecraft and believe it is a world, an alternate one for sure, but one with a nature that emerges rather than gets delivered. Is immersion something I was seeking? What I know is that I wanted to drop the player into the world with the only rule being that they can't build or break anything, and then leave them to do as they please. There was no performance granted to them or expected of them. There would be no wrong choices to make, only choices that get you further through the map or don't. I would be freeing the player from the need to conform to typical player standards or adventure map etiquette by controlling for all potential input. It may have required the map, the game, to become deeply simple, but it would enable a deeper organization, otherwise harder to grasp. Sure, you could cheat, build your way out, look beyond the walls, and find out that the regular, uncursed world still exists out there, but my world would be defined to every corner, no part of its experience an oversight. At worst, there would be poor design choices, but nowhere would there be an absence of choice. The planned structure was that you would go through an easy area, find a temple, learn it was stolen from in a medium-level challenge, and then face a big set piece where you'd find the artifact and face a greater challenge. The broader challenge would be in navigation over execution. I wanted the jumping stuff to be chill and save the technical for the optional collectible. A look at the first cycle. There are two gaps in the surrounding walls. One leads to an ice village, and the other blocked by an iceberg, intentionally dragged into the closing barriers with ships to try and slow them down. You have to climb through it, but to do so involves surviving a long fall, which you need special boots for from the ice village. There is little instruction that this is what must be done, but there is also very little to do. And for this first part of the map, the key areas stand out more. The shaving of the land doubles as both a practical choice and a narrative one. The pillar must have an unnatural effect on nature. After the mostly simple and straightforward pathway through the ice village, being introduced to all the ways you can jump and navigate around blocks, getting an idea of what this adventure map is going to be like, you return and pass the iceberg to reach some kind of wizard tower. Sneaking inside, you learn they couldn't use their magic to do anything about the barriers, so instead they opted to build bridges that made you move fast. Public transport at the end of the world. This was a map solution to skipping biomes I didn't want to use. Maybe I want to build a temple in the jungle, but it's 10,000 blocks away. This is how I would deal with that. Journals left behind by a reoccurring character lazily regurgitate my thoughts from the workshopping process. The wizard must have built these bridges because they couldn't solve the barriers. Wow. I couldn't help but attempt to give some soul to the fiction through the notes left behind, but most of them are just ideas for what I figured people would be thinking in this situation. I had little to actually say besides, how are we going to do X? If only we had Y. Thanks for the tip. The speed bridges would take you to a village soon to be crushed at a small distance away from some strange temple, with some giant slabs sticking out of the ground. This temple should hold an artifact somewhere. With enough exploration, you'll find pathways that eventually take you to the place where the artifact rests. Some parts of the path are obvious, some parts are dangerous, and one path takes faith. I recall that the interior design of the temple was supposed to be temporary. I would define the path and make it look pretty afterwards. I think it's better left the way it is. If it was too noisy, it might be less clear that the way forward is always around. That while the temple may have a fictional reason to exist, it is also another step in the game. The next area would be much noisier, so maybe this area functions like training, adapting the player to a pattern they will apply everywhere else. The temple artifact isn't here, but there is a way to the top of the temple, which is where you need to go in order to get through the surface slab holding the next barriers apart. Passing through, you discover a city that many have fled to. Its king is going to try and escape the barriers in a blimp, and everyone wants to come with him. It and his castle are not a finished part of the map. The city is hostile and blocks all entry, but with the help of some tools left behind by outsiders cooperating with the wizard, you go to a farm on the outside that has managed to assemble a weird way to get through the walls. You would then be trying to make your way through secret passageways and trespassing around a city divided by barricades and gates at every turn. The city is not abandoned, sometimes you hear people talking, sometimes you'll cross some angry soldiers, but they're just more things to jump over. Finding out where to go is a matter of looking out for ways to gain height, or get past walls through property damage caused by outsiders. Potted plant is left behind to follow along with. Why did I choose one that was green? The city worked like a giant Hypixel house, just drafting out some shapes and threading a path through the space until it was full. I would choose a direction, raise some structures, and then come up with a way to turn it into parkour or puzzle space. Some areas could have had better utilization, but almost never was there an area you could miss. Upon reaching the castle and the blimp, you would be finding the remains of the king and the artifact he stole. Then you'd be off to go find the next gap in the giant walls to start the next cycle and continue your adventure. Whatever remains of the earth, you would meticulously walk every surface, no cliff or rooftop absent from the climb towards whatever could be waiting. Whether the now hollow kingdoms fell gracefully or in chaos, whether nature would flourish or join in the decay, whether the notes left behind had anything worth reading, the only thing to do is leap over all of it. I would try to insert more writing, but only because I figured I had to and not because I had anything in particular to say, or at least not on purpose. I recall thinking about developing some unseen characters through the notes, but they'd only exist so I could kill them in a way that was sad. The fiction of this parkour map is about the end of the world, and therefore if there are people, I need to kill them so the audience can go, oh no! Because when you have a character for a while, and then they die, it's sad. And that's what good writing is, I think. I'm sure I didn't write as much as I could describe right now, but there was something of an idea for a subplot where two characters would keep finding each other's camps and reading their notes and falling in love. And then they'd finally manage to get together near the end, somewhere you could just barely see them, actual NPCs, people who aren't dead yet. And then another character, a cowardly doomer guy, kills them both, either because he's crazy or he thinks he's liberating them. Maybe you'd have the option to kill him or leave him begging for the curse to take him, or maybe the curse takes him. I don't know, it would have sucked, like, why did Mechasolaris create these women just to die? Is the doomer a phobe? Does Mechasolaris have something to say about love and faith? No, he just wants his parkour map to feel like a big deal and doesn't realize that building up investment in a love story just to kill it for shock value is super predictable and boring. Which, actually, may not have made for a bad contribution to this map, given everything else. The plan for when you got the last of the artifacts would have been that you also get an elytra glider so that you could quickly fly back to the very beginning. The sky would become a shortcut all the way to the pillar where you started, every area and every challenge now beneath you. The pillar has a hole inside, allowing entrance, waiting in a place that was always accessible but completely unreachable without the elytra. If you were allowed to place 2 blocks, the map would have been over in 2 minutes. Entering the pillar would take you into one more ghost god hallucination, a meeting with the creator of the curse. It's Herobrine, of course. This is where the map ends. He'd say something, I don't know what, and then you get whatever is closest to an end screen or a credit scroll. Are the artifacts going to stop him? Are you trading him the artifacts for reversing the curse? I only know that nothing else happens. It basically would have went, hello, insert flavor text. Thanks for playing. The end. Do you save the world or not? I think the question would have been left unanswered. Is it a sacrifice and you don't get to know? Is the game about hope? About trying even when you don't get to see the end? 2020 Mechasolaris did not know, but I think it's kind of a meta expression about my desire to be a master. It's consistent with how I felt about everything else. Alongside this project was an hour-long guide video to a multiplayer survival horror game, SCP's Secret Laboratory, a guide made to comprehensively cover every aspect of the game, most of which I had assembled from experience and memory rather than study. It took some planning and problem solving, but I ultimately wasn't doing anything unfamiliar to my ability. Later that year, I would try to make a Secret Lab themed hack for Super Mario 64, most of the work belonging to planning level structure and doing art, making models and downscaling textures, work that I could cruise through. Every part of it would exist, but the programming necessary to bring it to life, a skill I thought I could bypass with the rise of accessible tools for Mario 64 hacks, but that I had reached the limits of. In 2021, I aimlessly bounced around the Unity game engine in the hopes that I could actually get into the medium of games for real, but turned away at anything difficult. Anything that suggested even a little bit of intermediate understanding of code, retreating to projects where I already knew how to handle everything. I made a full Minecraft texture pack, translating the visuals of the RPG game Omori, a game about escaping to a dream world, to the visuals of Minecraft, every block and item matching to their contextual, practical, or just color equivalent. A translation that needed some creativity, some study, and sometimes some filler, but a translation I was proud of for the accuracy I believed I had given it, an accuracy that depends on a strong familiarity with the involved material. The Pages adventure map crushes an entire world, all of its potential history and culture, the hopes and despair of everyone who might have lived in it, into a mere jump challenge. The measure of all nature and humanity's impact on it, now the measure of your ability to win a game. Every time I tried to learn code, the tutorials were always specific, but included more broad information you either already had to know, or accept not knowing just to get along, and I didn't like that. If you wanted to write a story, or a song, or a poem, and also wanted it to be good, wouldn't your success depend a lot on whether you knew the language you were speaking in? That maybe the dictionary holds a word that would make for a perfect articulation, or transform the way you speak entirely if only you had known it? The barriers, the micromanaged terrain, the paper and their boring words, the structures and their inadvertent reason, it's all to achieve writing a poem with perfect vocabulary by writing it in a language with the fewest words. It's all about making the whole world into one that is capable of being mastered, for a player's mastery to be one and the same as the mastery of a creator. I wanted so badly for the act of creation not to be a struggle of study and repetition and failed attempts, but of a master exercising their power, of a master at play. It's no wonder I chose Minecraft. Building a city sounds hard, but if all you needed to make a big city was to play a game for a little bit, how could that not be great? It seems like it shouldn't make sense for us to quit at the castle town, and we definitely did for all the usual reasons, but I think it was also that, because we were close to the end of a cycle, I was thinking of further cycles, of future bridges and temples and kingdoms, and I did not want to do more. Sure, you might argue that this was a project that did need 100 levels. How can you master the world if you only visit one kingdom? But then maybe crushing the world down to only have one kingdom is actually consistent with the point. I hadn't considered rounding the project down at the time, but I had accomplished exactly what I had planned to do. This was not a project that I would put into limbo bitterly. I was satisfied. The blocks had served me as I had intended for them to. We were in the stage of our typical pattern where we start thinking too big and then go for a horizontal hop to something else, but what was clear to me is that it could not be Minecraft again. Pages, this adventure map, was the best I had, the most I wanted. The canvas and the resolution had empowered me, but my dreams were always elsewhere. Minecraft may be worthy of a dream, but I had only been using it to escape from the fear that my dreams were impossible, that to create something worthy would require mastery, and mastery would either be beyond me or not desirable, that in the mediums I wished to make of, I would not enjoy creation. Was it now only confidence that stood in the way then? Pages was not a perfect creation, nor were we really its master. We already admit to as much in talking about our fruitless attempts at character and how temporary visual style would serve the whole better by accident. I had to confess by now that constraints were not my enemy, that not everything needs to chase a dream in order to be worth the time. I doubt I could say I felt that way, but late 2021, crossing into 2022, the next time inspiration for a game idea would come along, I would make an effort to bring it to life. It was small and lacking substance as usual. I cannot write, so I tried to steal something from Minecraft that would help me make it work. Specifically, I would attempt to inject into it my parkour blocks. Sometime in November of 2021, I had a weird video game dream, a literal dream, and it was potent. It made no sense, of course, and I'm not sure the dreams you have in your sleep are a good source of inspiration. Nevertheless, I would capture everything I can remember and stick it in the folder where dozens of other crude drawings and text documents for game ideas rested. The game was 2D and 3D. It had stone that was purple, platforms with pillars, caves with glow sticks, and a bush. You, a teddy bear, would yank your owner, a girl, out of multiple times to an increasingly scary effect. Project folder is Purple Pillar Glow Stick Girl Bush, which is very helpful. In reverse engineering the concepts into making sense, the game would be about a toy that progressively fails to recognize and take care of its owner, with 2D sections serving story and 3D sections in between featuring some kind of scavenger hunt. Creating a character controller in Unity wouldn't be so difficult, but I did not have a good process for drafting environments. There was also a specific trick I wanted to pull off where the 2D sections and the 3D sections were the same. It would look entirely like a top-down RPG game with movement locked to the tiles, but then suddenly the game would go 3D, the world still made of the same tiles, only now existing with depth and from a new perspective. This would not be easy, and you really don't want to start off with something hard. But lucky me! Maybe I can use Minecraft for this. And maybe the scavenger hunt can be like a non-linear Hypixel house. So then it would predictably turn out that Minecraft would suck up all the project time. When a level layout was completed and it was time to see about translating it into something custom for Unity, we would try to make another level instead, repeating for a month until it was time for another horizontal hop. But where else will we go? I don't want to escape to another Minecraft project. I want to stay here and make something new. I don't want to bail on every creation that isn't immediately rewarding anymore. I don't need to make something big. I don't even need to make something good. I'd just like to be able to complete something. Minecraft is already open, and while it is an escape to go play a game, it's not a pivot if it isn't a creative thing. So now I'm on Hypixel, and now I'm on housing, and now I'm thinking, I gotta be able to finish this last house that I left behind a few years ago. And then I find out that Hypixel housing has changed a lot in those years. There are interactable NPCs, custom buttons with a large variety of outputs, and double the plot space, now a 101 block square. I cannot resist. I must build one more parkour house. It would be a non-linear exploration parkour on a floating island. Each checkpoint would belong to its own biome, and the challenge would be like usual. Find the most optimal route. I sketched out a guideline to organize the space, removed my YouTuber rank so nobody would ask questions as to why I have no Minecraft videos, and then it was time to roll. The blocks flow, I draft out shapes, I thread roads into the void and find ways to join the space in between, building walls with holes in them to allow the future to spill through, and then I spend some more time decorating. I check out the new NPC features, I try out the custom furniture. Who's that? That's my Herobrine. This is not their home, but I guess they're allowed to visit. The first checkpoint is in the southwest square and is the easiest. The second checkpoint is in the west square and is a bit trickier. The most obvious path can't be the best one, and a path that seems bad can't be too bad. That means if the checkpoint is high up in the trees, then why would you go down unless there was a shortcut down below? We can make that work with the slime blocks that Hypixel customizes to work like launch pads. I point some threads in the direction of the jungle, but I'm worried about the biomes getting claustrophobic, so I give some terrain to the desert in the southeast square, despite the fact that the checkpoint for that zone comes much later. I end up extending the desert space to the underground, and then I think I start getting lost in all the threads. The cycle must be about to reach its inevitable wall. We hop back to Purple Pillar Glow Stick Girl Bush to challenge its wall. In order to figure out how the 2D and 3D work together, I'm gonna need to get the visuals down, so now we are spending time drawing tiles, and I'm kinda getting carried away, and I find out just how not easy figuring this out is going to be. I may have had experience in drawing tiles, but designing them to read well from both perspectives requires some care. I insisted on only using 8 colors or so, and that helped in some places, but was difficult in others. Some tiles needed a lot of revisions, some things were hard to settle on, some tiles needed a lot of variation, some tiles really needed to know what they were depicting in 3D for the sake of physics collisions, so not everything could be done in the same order, and while this is all good and necessary stuff, all part of the process, it was still my wall, still easy to try and escape from. I was also very sure that I really wanted to finish that Hypixel house no matter what. We block out some shapes to occupy space, find some anchors for the lanes, and threads to orbit off of. Sometimes it's a big pillar for everything to revolve around. Sometimes it's a trail of blocks to draw the outline of the Earth, dividing the empty space into interior and exterior. The rest of the definition gets found much faster with even just one line to work off of. When what comes does not seem to offer many ideas for naturally occurring platforms, we accept unnatural platforms, whatever will fill the space so that we can draft the rest. Sometimes a trail of blocks is placed to loosely define a critical lane, to imagine a potential thread and measure it against the ones that already exist. The map was a labyrinth where we wanted all directions to have similar distance towards each destination, so drawing these winding spirals through the air was a way of measuring approaches. It would not be easy to consider how they work for the directions and routes of the map that did not exist yet, but if we made no effort, then it could be that one part of the map is too powerful, grants too much access, or grants too little. We didn't want it to be too tight, but we didn't want a player to judge a path for its looks. They would have to try everything in order to find the best path. Some routes wouldn't be too pretty, but it was all to stop certain paths from being way too fast, an easily occurring outcome. Sometimes I would leave it rough, sometimes I would break the path if it was really necessary. Creating large areas and isolating space for locations of interest I figured was good for appeal. The map is a maze, but if it was too consistent or symmetrical, if all areas of equal size and proportion, the world might lose itself in its own noise. If the player is to unravel it, they'll need to remember it, and so it needs to be memorable. Decoration is good, but I think the form of a space leaves a greater impression. They might see the jungle lead into the mountain, which leads into a stronghold, which leads into the mushroom cave, and be able to list off those locations, but I think their success in sorting out the map depends more on their physical relationship with each location, above its visuals. Some areas would have a lot of trouble finding a good form, needing a lot of revision, sometimes requiring walls to get pushed around, sometimes needing new walls to keep its threads in order. Like in Pages, I tried to keep parkour integrated as naturally as I could into the world itself. I would build something and try to convert it to parkour, which didn't always work the first time, but when I could make it happen, I was very satisfied. I was sad to lose this tree because it was nice, but it blocked a very important sightline between checkpoints. I was already concerned players might not be confident to go anywhere in a parkour as indirect as this. I was happy to get rid of this stupid underground statue room. Not a bad idea for an anchor location, but it wasn't even an intersection. I scrapped it to give more room to the nether area. In the desert, I needed a way to give it more structure and came up with another pillar. This one, a skeleton hand holding a chain connecting to a desert temple with a UFO over it. We changed it to a Zelda-like fairy fountain later. This was a Minecraft build that finally didn't need me to try and inject it with life. I was constructing something more mathematical. I have some drawings for an area that was particularly having trouble avoiding a catastrophic collapse of map integrity or something, and I needed to work out a knot in the threads. There was a day in the past where I actually understood these scribbles. I know what area it refers to, but I've lost track of the threads myself. I have over 2,000 screenshots over the 6 months I spent working on this thing. I could find a lot of ways to keep yapping about the project. All the things I knew how to handle, all the things I didn't, and all the things that were easy and all the things that weren't. Sometimes the project would lose momentum, as my projects always have. Only now I wasn't worried about vaguely defined drawings or writing ideas I didn't know how to proceed with. It was all in vaguely defined threads, as I've called them. I wouldn't let myself drop it though. I'd often sit with the struggle for a while, jumping in circles, listening to music, hoping for the answer to show itself. This doesn't really work. I'm afraid in order to solve a problem, you have to actually think about it. Luckily, if you bore yourself long enough, thinking eventually becomes interesting. Sometimes I would escape back to the minigames. I spent a good amount of time trying to level up my Hypixel account just so I could make part of my name tag pink, or so I would say. It was at least a goal I could use to deceive myself from the escape. But I've never really liked Minecraft combat, so the games which had the quickest rewards were not on my list. I was more into build battles, or a real favorite, pixel painters. I haven't regularly drawn for a long time. Every once in a while I'll fill a piece of paper with bad sketches of my Herobrine, but I've never been compelled to practice or really learn how to draw properly. How to make people, how to design characters, how to really construct worlds. I'm not gonna tell you that I got into pixel painters and got super passionate about it, but I will tell you something else. Having a few minutes to fill a 79 by 52 pixel canvas with something relevant to a specific theme, made it real easy to just put stuff down. Find the quickest way to communicate an idea at best, or find a pattern that appeals to the vote at worst. The themes would often be extremely simple and in few enough number that things would repeat themselves if you played enough. I found if you wanted to draw, it was not easy to get things done pretty or quickly. Lines at this resolution are pretty thick, so if you wanted to get a picture done faster, it was better to just draw your volumes directly with a thicker brush. You would paint. Sometimes I would brush out the shape of a subject and then draw an outline on top of them just to help with contrast. Contrast was difficult. It was either you had dark on bright or bright on dark. If you wanted to draw an Enderman in the end dimension, good luck. Painting was easier, faster, and produced better results for this canvas. The next obstacles being in color choice and, of course, what to do with the prompt. Sometimes I'd pick a joke, or maybe I'd lock in to do something pretty. Sometimes a pretty picture would show up and I didn't know how it got there. One time we got alphabet as the prompt, and everyone in the match either left or was like, what the heck are we supposed to do with this lame prompt? Are we going to judge each other for the font choice? For whether we assign the correct color to each letter? For whether we remember the alphabet? Turns out, you can organize a composition even with no context at all. Many times we got candle or torch as a prompt, and every time would be a yellow gradient on a dark blue canvas. One of my last ones had this prompt, and I put Steve in a cave. It looks like this, and it might be my favorite painting of all. I really wish I knew how I had put it together, whether Steve was rendered first or this arc of the cave ceiling above. It displays so little, but to me, contains so much. Anyways, I'd be here, stalling on the house, probably reaching a prompt that asked for something plain or difficult to know what to do with in an interesting way, and I'd draft something out anyways, often finding results that were mundane, but also finding that I liked having painted regardless. The house needed this. There would be many times I get stumped on how to continue the house, many challenges of many kinds. What should I do to make this part special? What should I do to make this part work with all the other parts? But I would eventually get tired of not being able to find the perfect answer and just put something down. Often I found that when I got blocks moving, the results came along eventually, and I get better at finding them each time. If I had forgotten that I liked doing this, I just needed a push to help me remember. Once the build got closer to completion, I got more interested in using the new housing features and started planning for a second progression alongside finding the fastest path. The map would be littered with collectibles and rewards granted based on your completion time. These you could use for crafting or gambling in a shop to gain currency you can spend on things to help increase your housing level. You could gain a maximum housing rank with flight permissions by beating the fast time as usual, but you could also progressively build up your rank by performing in the house. I'm not sure it was a great system, but it was planned very thoroughly. There were a lot of limitations to all the custom interactables, and I had to sacrifice most of my NPCs and all the furniture, but I would use the interactables to their fullest. Many notes would be taken on how to handle all the shops, what the collectibles would do, and how you got them and where you got them from. A secondary layer of threads woven into the first. My plans were in the realm of possible, but compounded in complexity very quickly, and would have taken a lot of tedious effort to set up, and a lot of care not to break. It was a whole different process from the one of placing blocks, but one I was committed to and ready to keep making my little pushes for until I found the fun in it. It was only a little more complicated than my command block work, most of the challenge being in efficiently using housing resources, but I liked it, for the most part. When I wasn't liking it, I would start doing recordings as an incentive to keep up my momentum with it. Communicate what I was doing so I wasn't just rolling for nothing. It was gonna take a long time. I'm lucky enough to capture the moment housing got an update that would let me copy and paste interactable instructions, rather than need to write them manually for each individual one, likely saving me several hours of terrible work.
What? They updated housing! No! They did this! Oh my god, this is... Oh my god!
With every project I'd ever worked on, a lot of time would be spent escaping to other things, but this one we stuck with the most. I ended up in one escape, jumping back to the older house I left behind and filled the vacant space in only a few days. The last couple weeks of my ultimate Hypixel house would be spent on skimming through everything, checking the build for issues in form, overhauling appearance where necessary, and ensuring every NPC, every area trigger, and every variable was without any oversights in their function. We also goofed around with secrets. Herobrine had to make a cameo, of course, to offer an alternate challenge. Eventually, there would be no room left to do anything with. This 101 block square space was entirely occupied by a labyrinth crafted with as much care as I could possibly give it. When I opened the house to allow visitors, I got a few. Most left immediately, and the ones who tried expressed confusion. The ones who completed a run through the map took a very long time. I tried to make some design changes to help with navigation, but there were some fundamental things that didn't work. For one thing, despite a 101 block square seeming kinda small to my own senses, this had to be overwhelming. It didn't help that it was nowhere near as direct as most other parkours would be. Aside from design itself, I'd never told anyone I was working on this thing. I did make a teaser after finishing it for the Hypixel forums, but I really didn't like doing self-promotion like that. YouTuber rank wrought my expectations a little, I guess. One thing that was really bad that I never considered was that a fast time was 7 minutes. Players managed on my old non-linear parkours because they were short. 7 minutes is a long time to be perfect, especially for a map like this. I didn't think much of 7 minutes because, to me, the house was worth 100 hours. We've been here a while, and I'm not sure if you really want to see those 7 minutes, but I don't think I could show you them anyways because I apparently never took record of my fast path. I vaguely recall some earlier parts I'm sure of, but I literally don't know the optimal path anymore. It's kinda cool. I have to be the player if I want to remember being the creator. I take a run at my own creation, and I'm lost in it. It occupies very little volume in the space of my adventure maps, and yet it feels as though it is the biggest thing I've ever built. I need Hypixel to port housing to a mod so I can keep this thing with all of its functionality. It was obviously designed to be played, so when I figured the house might have some serious flaws in approachability and expectations, I was a little disappointed, but I didn't really want to run the house much at all. I wanted to build it, and I wanted to play it myself. I am the first member of the audience. Maybe it's impossible to communicate, but in wandering around it again, actually stepping into it rather than just looking back at my old showcase material, I can immediately feel it. That this tiny world is full of life. Despite not programming these blocks or drawing their art, I can see my hand in every part of it, despite the distance. It's fleeting, but when present, I lose all doubt that the time I spent placing blocks and stuff was worthwhile. This is the last part of the video. Congratulations. The World Tour Hypixel house would be my last project, meaning now I have to bring this video to a conclusion somehow. Completely honest, there hasn't really been much of a plan. The agenda said I should make a Minecraft video and a Secret Lab video with a personal spin on it before making too hard of a pivot on my channel, and despite all the wisdom of knowing I'll get lost without a map, I'd have to admit that I'm not so sure of what I've been doing with this one. The most basic idea was showcase all your Minecraft creations, things from the old era of the channel and the stuff that was never shared. But that was a lot of stuff over a long period of time. And to lay it out, even if I didn't talk about things in depth, I'm sure they would have gone and joined together to tell a story without me, and so the production of this video got slowed down dramatically in my attempts to control it, to know what it's going to say. It hasn't helped that I'm kinda more focused on what I'd like to do next. I think it's too much to attempt organizing into one story anyway. Too many loosely related threads to knit together without being crushed under their weight. I suppose this problem itself has been what the video is about. On the other hand, it may have all just been a fun excuse to talk about some stuff I like. I wonder about if I were the age I was in 2011 in 2022, how captured I would be by generative AI. It seems to have offered the same promise, a bridge into dreams. If all I have to do to build a big city is type a prompt, how could that not be great, right? What happens when I type the prompt Zelda game, or Portal game, or Counter-Strike game, or feature-length film, or 10,000-hour action RPG with profound and globally resonant story of critical acclaim? Does the output reflect my intentions? Does my input reflect my intentions? If I get what I asked for, will it be what I really wanted? I mention this because, depending on the day, I might look down on Minecraft as inferior, feeling that most of what I've done has only been dreaming and pretending, as a generative AI user does. I can't speak to the AI experience. But I doubt they feel much involvement and connection with their results, or the process of creation. Do prompters enjoy assembling their words? Do they see their words living in the result? Maybe the blocks lack precision and are easily observed by anyone, but you can see much more in them when they are yours. It's a kind of magic that is not a very easy thing to describe. You kinda just have to make things for yourself before you can know how special it is. To be clear, it's not a feature of the blocks, it's of the brushstroke. Or at least I hope so. I don't expect myself to get deep into every medium, but after 11 years or so, I know I'd like to play with a different brush. I may still dream too much and too big, but for the art I do pursue, I hope to find my blocks, the things that really matter, in whatever new thing it ends up being made of. I actually have a bit more playtime after 2022. November 2025, in early planning stages for this video, bouncing around Hypixel housing to gather showcase material, I had apparently accumulated 300 hours playing a mining tycoon, and that sounds really bad, but I was only kind of playing it. A mining tycoon is a type of Hypixel house where you break some self-replacing blocks to get currency and rank points. You use the currency to upgrade your capacity to gain currency and rank points, and you use your rank points to upgrade your housing permissions to let you break better blocks that grant even more currency and rank. It's a cookie clicker. Watching a number go up is addicting. Fortunately, newer versions of Minecraft allow you to toggle block breaking on without needing to hold down a button. So all I had to do was open the game in the morning, aim my character at the blocks, and then leave him to do all the work for me. It's embarrassing. Also, fortunately, because Minecraft pauses if you try to tab out and do something else with your computer, I did not run it on my main PC, I was running it on the cheapest email laptop you can buy. Something I did not pick up for housing, but for benchmarking games. Ideally, my own games. On an empty Godot engine project, my PC gets around 8,000 frames per second, and the email laptop gets 700. It quickly closes in on 0 as soon as graphics start showing up, but that's what it's for. I haven't done a lot of testing. I've never gotten far enough on a project for it to be necessary. Most of my time spent in Godot has been in learning it and dabbling with different features of a survival horror type game. Something that, compared to the 10,000 hour action RPG blah blah blah, seemed small to me. Still have to learn my lesson, I guess. In that mining tycoon I was playing, it was quickly apparent that the limits of housing had to have been greatly expanded. The plot size has nearly doubled. To say I was tempted to start another parkour might almost be a lie. I like giant worlds, but I think if I were given this massive plot space, half of it would probably be padding or decoration. The proximities and the proportions and the quantities all require a balance, and infinity would rob it of its quality. The bounds of the canvas are merely a frame to control your attention, both the observer and creator, I think. One of my favorite games is one with a canvas that has no bounds, taking place across the entire universe. You play as an astronaut trying to solve an existential puzzle in your local solar system, traveling between each of its planets to unravel their mystery, the journey between them happening in real time, no illusions hiding the scale of something as massive and moving as a whole solar system. It's not very big. The planets are small enough for you to see their curve from the ground. It doesn't feel small while you play it, and it's incredibly alive compared to most games out there, but it isn't really a real solar system. Or maybe it is. Perhaps all the depth and complexity of an entire solar system can be created within reason, and it only has to be as challenging as building a house.